three were basically home-built cars in a garage, and then he went on. He never built a Mark V. The Mark V was always, that mark was reserved one day for a 100-mile-an-hour Austin 7 car, but then the 6 was the forerunner of the 7, and the 7 itself was where Lotus got into volume.
Driving this car is very much to put yourself at one with the road. Unlike other car manufacturers, perhaps, that try to isolate you from the road, Chapman tried to get you as close to it as possible, get as much feel back into the whole being. It's a wonderful experience. I mean, contemporary journalists of the time described it as a four-wheel motorbike, and somewhere around about half a hundredweight. Therefore, they could use a much lighter and smaller power unit, which was always Chapman's philosophy. Basically, he considered that speed really was lightness at the end of the day.
We asked the Customs and Excise, if you build a car from various parts, from various sources, do you have to pay purchase tax? And they said, well, no. So Colin said, well, how many sources? And they said, well, more than one. So when you bought your Lotus 7, you got 2 invoices. And you paid no tax.
Basically, the tub would arrive, less the interior and the wings, and he would put the whole thing together, put the engine in during the course of, say, a week. Instructions weren't given as such. You weren't allowed to supply instructions. Basically, what you would do is get a copy of the sports car and Lotus owner, and in there, a journalist would have had one of these cars to build, and he would have described how to build it. The people that would have bought these cars would have been sports cars enthusiasts that actually wanted a hands-on build car, something that they could actually feel that they've achieved something at the end of the day. They could drive the car on the road and take it out clubman racing if they wanted to at the weekends. It's historically recorded that somewhere in the region of 25% of these home-built cars were actually raced pre-1960. I suppose one of the most famous drivers of this mark must be Graham Hill, who in 1959 went out on a very wet Boxing Day at Brands Hatch and thrashed all the much bigger, more powerful aerodynamic cars to a sensational victory. In 1973, the production rights of the 7 were given to Graham Nern, who was the Lotus sales agent for Lotus at Caterham. He's continued to manufacture the car and develop the car up until the modern day equivalent. He's actually using the K-Series engine and the Vauxhall engine in the car now. It's been very successful, and they've instigated their own race series.
It's become timeless. It's a wonderful basic car, no doors, goes like hell, makes lovely noise, and it was basically cheap, and you could win races with it on Sunday and drive it to work on Monday. Everybody from 17 to 70 wants one.
It's brilliant. I love it. I love it to drive. When you drive it, it's exciting. It raises your adrenaline. It makes you feel part of the road, part of the whole thing of driving. It's just like nothing else.
Well, with the 7 paying the rent, Chapman could now do what he wanted to do, and that was to develop new technologies. And he obviously wanted to get rid of the chassis. And the way to get rid of the chassis was to design a monocoque fiberglass, and that was quite an innovation, fiberglass body shell, put a lightweight, high-powered engine in it, put top-class Lotus suspension in it, and then build a car that was aesthetically beautiful.
This car is a 1962 Lotus Elite. It has a 1216 Coventry Climax engine, which was derived from a fire pump. And in this state of tune, it delivers 95 brake horsepower, which gives it a top speed of approaching 125 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in 10 seconds, and 0 to 100 in just over 20. The car only weighs 10 3/4 hundredweight, and it was revolutionary in its day. Colin Chapman thought the way to go was to produce a Grand Tourer, if you like, a closed coupe, something that people could remain warm and dry, And he was fascinated by this new material called GRP, glass reinforced plastic. As it turned out, it was extremely complicated to do, and 57 different molds make up this particular car. There is no chassis, and only 2 pieces of steel are in this structure, hence the lightweight.
And the Lotus Elite is still a most beautiful car to behold from any angle. There's not an ugly way to look at it. Whether you look down on it from above, you lie down on the pavement and look at it, you photograph it from any angle, I defy you to find an ugly angle.
The car was an amazing success. You have to think back at the time when it was penned in '57, the first cars were delivered towards the end of 1958. You had the choice of an MGA or a TR3, big, heavy, ponderous cars. And here you had this amazing, delicate little vehicle that if you sneezed, you ended up in the ditch. Nobody in the motoring public or press at that time were prepared for this amazing razor-sharp steering and, of course, lightning brakes.
Lotus marketing has always been fairly simple. Right from the start, perhaps when Colin Chapman had very little money, he wouldn't want to market through advertising, taking space in magazines, producing expensive brochures. When they were more successful and perhaps had the money to market, they didn't need to. Their racing successes provided the advertising, and Chapman, I think, traditionally didn't provide materials, resources, archives. He wasn't concerned with that sort of thing. Certainly early Lotus material is very factual. It gives a simple picture, simple specifications and text. If you wanted a Lotus, you had the common sense to work out what pedigree it had got, the common sense to work out that it was fast. You weren't told anything in Lotus material. And you certainly weren't impressed by Lotus material, you were impressed by Lotus cars.
Driving an Elite today, where we're all cocooned in completely hush-hush Vauxhall Cavaliers and the like, this is mind-blowingly noisy. As it doesn't have a separate chassis, the little cabin area acts as a sound box. So you have absolutely everything coming into your ears. You have the rear suspension thumping away, you have the prop shaft 2 inches from your knee, the gearbox is 2 inches from your shins. Everything is sitting in there with you. The fuel consumption knocks the spots of virtually every car known to man today and regularly returns over 45 to the gallon at 90 miles an hour. I first saw the Elite at the 1957 Motor Show. I was 9 years old at the time, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, and I still do.
In the late 50s, the cars that Chapman was designing and building were still specifically to win races, and they were winning races. The company was getting into single-seater racing. The company was beginning to attract names like Innes Ireland and Graham Hill, both to work in the company and drive the cars. And all over the world, the name Lotus meant something. Almost every weekend, Lotus cars were winning the length and breadth of the world. At Hornsey, in 1957 onwards, they were building the Elite successfully. They were building racing cars for sale all over the world, and they were winning races. Team Lotus itself was establishing itself, knocking on the door of Formula One and winning other events. And of course, the Lotus 7 was paying the rent. Against this background of success, the company was ready to move forward. And more by accident than design, a new car was beginning to take shape that would be built at the new factory at Cheshunt, and this would really put Lotus on the map. This was excitement on 4 wheels.
This car is a Lotus Elan S2, built in 1965. It was bought in that year as a kit of parts, which was a service offered by Lotus in an effort to avoid purchase tax. You could either opt for the kits or you could buy a ready assembled car. This one was assembled by the local distributor and has been in the family ever since. first ride in this car was obviously in 1965, when I was about 3.5 years old, and I can remember it vividly. It was at night, so I presume it was the day that my father had just bought it, and he must have woken me up, taken me down into the car and took me up the road. I was actually sitting on the transmission tunnel, and I can remember the exhilaration and the speed. It seemed a different world to me. That has stuck in my mind ever since. The Elan rose out of the ashes, really, of the Lotus Elites. After about 1,000 Elites had been produced, Chapman went back to the drawing board, and the result was the Elan.
Chapman wanted the concept of chassis-less construction to continue into the Elan. Ron Hickman, the design and development director, wanted to test all the rolling components of the vehicle. So one night at a dinner, Chapman and Hickman designed a one-off test bed chassis it was called the fold along the dotted line chassis. They actually mocked it up on the menu card, like these things you cut out of a Kellogg's cornflake packet. But that chassis proved to be so good, so docile, gave the car such enormous handling, and proved so cheap to make, that from that day on, we at Lotus adopted the backbone chassis concept.
The Elan was the first car that Lotus produced that made any money, and it was very important, probably a milestone car in that respect. The Elite had been a sales disaster. The Elan really was an instant success. It proved reliable, comfortable. It was more refined to drive than the Elite. It was a car that was designed really for twisty A roads and B roads, and that's where it excels. It's comfortable too. That's a surprising factor, especially when you look inside the car and you see the seats, which are obviously an old-fashioned design, and they look thin and appear not to have much body to them. But I've driven the car for hours at a time, and I don't get any hint of backache at all. Driving position's good. It's the classic straight leg, straight arm position, and that's probably got a lot to do with it. It's an easy car to drive. It's an easy car to drive quite quickly. It's very forgiving. Because it holds the road so well, you often don't know how fast you're going. And that all-round drivability, I think, is what has made it so popular. It's the true classic British sports car.
By 1965-66, Lotus were in an expansion requirement in every possible area. We needed to build more factories. We couldn't get an industrial development certificate to expand in the existing location. And also we wanted a test track. We've been using the A10 for testing racing cars and road cars for years, and the residents and the police were getting a bit fed up. We were in a sort of unionised labour sandwich with Luton just up the road and Dagenham just down the road. Both make manufacturing cars. And of course our employees knew what was being paid on the production lines and the overtime, and we couldn't meet those figures. And we'd also lose labour to Dagenham and Vauxhall when they really were recruiting heavily. And the other thing was we were dead set against any form of union in the factory. We had enough problems when our suppliers went on strike. And for Chapman, the idea that our own employees might go on strike was absolutely out of the question. He went on record as saying, if this company comes unionised, I will shut it down. Lotus styling had been done in-house with using consultants like John Frayling, but it was Collins' final decision and Collins' aesthetic eye that decided the styling and set the standard, which was always very high. The first break away from that was when Giugiaro in Italy offered to do a body design on the Europa, and that of course became the Esprit and opened up a whole new era of design for Lotus and a big move upmarket. Less cars, bigger engines, higher prices.
Lotus made the Esprit, I think, to capture the Ferrari market. They wanted basically an Italian car design, which they had in Giugiaro, and people wanted something which was a match for the Ferrari. As soon as the Esprit was produced, everybody wanted one. It was in great demand. The second Esprit, the Esprit S2, sold like hotcakes. You couldn't get them for love nor money. The reason most people buy a Lotus Esprit is because of the way it looks, the sharp, angular design, the very Ferrari-like look, the Italian styling, not really for the performance. You know, the performance is an added bonus.
When we decided to turbocharge the Esprit, when Chapman said it had got to be done, he bought nearly everything with a turbocharger, including 2 aeroplanes, and they were all studied, and the car was totally re-engineered to take a turbocharger. He didn't just hang one on an engine and see how it would go. So he was always pushing ahead. Everything had to be better and better and better.
It's a very exciting car to drive, superb handling. With the HC engine, it's a very quick car. There's very little on the road that will accelerate as quickly as this. The handling is superb in wet or dry conditions. Being a mid-engine car, everything is in the right place. The fuel tanks are each side of the engine. Most of the weight is inside the wheels. That's to say that there's very little overhang each end. So it makes it a very enjoyable car to drive, a very exciting car to drive. A little bit twitchy on the limit because it's mid-engined, but most owners never find the limit. The Lotus Esprit lifted Lotus onto another plane. Suddenly, they lost their kit car image. The top of the range now is the Turbo Esprit Sport 300, which has bigger wings, bigger wheels, and a 300 brake horsepower engine. Basically, Peter Stevens came along and he rounded all the edges of the Giugiaro Esprit. The Giugiaro Esprit owners feel that was sacrilege, it ruined their car, and would not give house room to a Peter Stevens car. The same can be said for Peter Stevens designed owned cars. They feel the Esprit Giugiaro is dated and looks old-fashioned.
In the cutthroat competition of the supercar or semi-supercar market, you had to produce materials that, in a pile by the armchair, could compete with the other sports car manufacturers, the TVRs or even the Jaguars, the Mercedes sports cars, so that your Lotus material became more significant.
I first saw an Esprit at the 1975 Motor Show, which was a white S1 Esprit with a gleaming wolf race wheels. And it looked like something from outer space. It was just absolutely amazing. Nobody had ever seen one. There was never been another car like it. And it was so futuristic. And I thought, well, I've got to own one of these, but I never ever thought I would. The very word Lotus evolves all sorts of feelings inside. The Lotus is more than just a car. It's a hobby. It's great fun to drive. For me, it's my whole life. Everything I do is all around Lotus cars.
From the mid-70s, the British motor industry was having a very bad time indeed. In fact, all luxury markets were really badly hit, and Lotus were particularly badly hit. I wouldn't say the quality of the product was particularly good, so of course you missed out on brand loyalty. Not many Lotus buyers were selling a car and buying another one. So that was a problem. Chapman was not doing well in Grand Prix racing, and as that was his number one love, it's possible that too much time was being devoted to trying to recover the reputation of the racing team. And the company put out 1 or 2 bad balance sheets at that time. Being a public company by then, of course, that was very important. The company had problems with financing. Lotus did have financing problems. Chapman's brilliantly innovative twin chassis Grand Prix car was banned by the FIA. The DeLorean business had gone sour. Chapman was under colossal stress, and he came home in December 1982 from a sad meeting in Paris and died.
When Chapman died in 1982, it was a devastating blow for the company because he was such an inspirational leader to the company and to all the people in the company and to our customers worldwide that we all were rocked back on our feet and we just wondered which way the company was going to go. And it took quite a long time for the spirit of Lotus to really get back up again and get the company back going full speed.
It's an incredible company. And it's all there. It's just an energy that Chapman created. So Chapman is still alive in the way that company thinks. He set standards. People would still say, I wonder what the old man would have done.
In the next year or two, we're going to introduce 2 new cars, the first of which is going to be a very small, very lightweight, very exciting sports car that's going to showcase a whole lot of new technology. It's really going to be following the classic Lotus philosophy of lightweight, simplicity, elegance, and huge driver fun. But it's going to, as I say, really look forward into the future, looking to 10 years ahead in terms of manufacturing technology. The other new product that's on the way is a new engine for the Esprit, which is going to carry us forward quite considerably. Colin Chapman was passionate about cars, passionate about engineering, and passionate about competition. He wanted to be the best in motorsport. He wanted to produce the most exciting sports cars that the world had ever seen. And I like to think that the people that we've got here today and the visions that we've got for the future will see us doing exactly those things.
Seawings next reports on the training involved to become a Tomcat pilot.